All right, so where are we now? It's 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Thanks very much for those of you out there who've joined us. It'd be really interesting to know at some point how you heard about this, if it was on my Instagram, Facebook, if it was from BenQ, or actually it was in my newsletter, because it seemed to, the newsletter seems to do quite a good thing of getting in touch with people. But like I say, thanks very much for joining me. We're going to go through just pretty much a retouch of a picture, I guess, really, because what I didn't want to do was just suddenly dive in and sort of say, look, here's how we color a picture. I think it's always useful when we look at a workflow from start to finish, because then everything seems to make sense. I've always said when I've been teaching that anybody can learn techniques. The real skill, if you like, if you want to call it that, is knowing how to combine them all to get the end result. So we're going to go through a couple of pictures that you can see on the screen at the moment. But before we do that, just a couple of things to let you know about. As we're going through this, I think you've got like a little panel on your screen, part of the Go webinar facility. You've got a section there where you can type in questions. So feel free to type some questions in there. And then at the very, very end, because we're going to run for roughly 45 minutes, something like that. And then we're going to pick out some of the questions and see if we can answer those as well, so long as they're not too difficult. All right, so that's one thing. And also, it's just, I guess, for me, just a big thank you to BenQ, because I have had tremendous support from BenQ. Don't intend this to be any kind of sales pitch whatsoever, but hopefully those of you followed me for a while, you'll know that I'd like to think that I've built a reputation on trust. And if I use kit, it's because it does what I want it to do. And then when I've got that confidence in it, I'm very happy to share about that. So I do use the BenQ monitors, and I do quite often get asked which ones I use. The one I mainly work on, because it's nice and big, is the model, get this right now, SW320. So it's a 32-inch screen. Colors are brilliant when I come to do printing out. It's the first monitor I've ever used when I've calibrated it, that when I do send off for prints, actually as of next week, I'm doing my own printing, so look out for something we're doing with that. The colors have always been perfect. I've never had to make any kind of adjustments with it. So very, very happy with that. And another little thing that you get with them, which is just a bit of advice when you're getting your monitors, make sure that you have what is called a lens hood. This is kind of like a little frame that goes around your screen and comes away several inches there to protect it from any light hitting the screen, because that can really kind of throw off what you're really seeing. It'll give you a false representation of the actual brightness and the colors and what have you. So that's that. But let's have a look then. We're going to go through, like I said, a retouch. But first of all, before we do that, let's have a look at some pictures to show the importance of color. So let me just bring up, we're in Lightroom at the minute. I do tend to use Lightroom mainly I use Lightroom a little bit. There are people out there that do so much in Lightroom, but I just kind of I dust over my pictures and then get straight into my happy place, which is Photoshop. But just to give an idea of how color can affect things, here we've got pretty much an out of camera picture of a photograph I did by a girl called Rosa, and here's where it's had its color added. Yes, now I know there are things that have been added onto the background. That's purely the texture, but if you just look at the color, you can see what difference that makes. Here's an out of camera picture from a 1940s RAF photograph we did, and then you can see now when we go to the coloring, the difference that it makes. And all this kind of coloring that we're doing now, the first one you see is before, the second one is after. Here we go, before out of camera, coloring added, before, after. You can see how that really does kind of change the picture there. And then finally a picture here, my friend Barry King. This is the out of camera picture when last week we had a bit of a play with some flags when we're doing some photo shoots, and you can see just a little bit of color change there does make a huge difference. So when it comes to having your own look that you want to your pictures, I actually think it comes from mainly a couple of things. The first one is the lighting. But let's face it, there's only so much that you can do with lighting, I think, really, to create your own style. I favor the Rembrandt style of lighting, and that's been around for a long time. But I kind of hope now that people tend to know one of my images when they see it. And that's ultimately what you want, isn't it? But a style that I've got has come from my lighting and then the color that I tend to add to it. And I want to show you how really easy that is. All right, so what are we going to go through picture-wise? We're going to go through one of my wartime pictures. It's one that I photographed yesterday of a veteran. Here's just some of the pictures that are actually in my 1940s World War II project. Just quickly skip through some of these. These can include real veterans, folks here that you can see now, they were children during the war. And then we come to veterans here. This is a submariner. This is a 4-1 commando during D-Day, Ted Owens. Here we've got George Avery. and then the guy that I photographed yesterday, which is Jeff Howard. So we're going to go through the steps within this picture. So let's dive over into Photoshop, and I'll take you through the rough kind of workflow for doing this particular thing. Now, as you start to do your own retouching, there'll be a kind of set pattern that I'm sure you'll develop as you go through it. So don't worry about what order you necessarily do things in. Doesn't really matter. You just kind of do what works best for you. But let's have a look how we're going to go through this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image. I don't want it to be in this particular kind of orientation here. I want to create a square, a one by one square crop for this, because I want this to have an oldish kind of look. And there was a lot of the old photographs when you look online, and also, you know, go to sort of like museums and stuff, you'll see a lot of them were that square crop. So I've just pressed C on the keyboard to get my crop tool. And we'll go to the ratio in the top here and drop down top left-hand corner, and we'll go 1:1 square. Now, when we have this 9 square grid, this 3x3 grid here, we can click on that and we can drag it around to start to place where we want it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an error which I'm going to get, and I'll show you how you can stop that error first of all. So let's just crop that down there. Now we want to click and drag out top left handle, top right handle, something like that, and then press enter. And what you'll see is, yes, it's kind of cropped it nice and big. As opposed to cropping in, it's cropped outwards. But can you see now how we've got these black lines either side of it? And we don't really want that, because I want to fill this area here, these black areas here, to match the background that's actually behind Jeff. So we'll step back and show you what you need to do. It's real simple. All you need to do is just come over to the layers panel. Here you've got your background layer, and just click once to release it. So now it becomes layer 0. Okay, it makes a big difference when you start to use the crop tool. So now we dive back in again. Now we're going to get our crop. Let's drag it out there. We've got our square. Reposition it. I don't want to go quite so far down. Maybe around about there is looking good. Again, this time we'll drag left. And we'll drag right, and I'll position his head roughly, although I don't tend to stick to rules. We'll go for the rule of thirds, and we'll keep his head in that third there. So let's just press enter to commit that in. So now we do have these transparent pixels going on either side. Now at the top of the screen, we do have options, and these options are unique to the tool that you're currently using. And one of the options here is this one on the far right, is where as we crop, it will automatically then, once you've done the crop, it will then use content aware to fill the areas in. And you could use that. However, what I know with this one is, because I've only got a small amount of space from where Jeff is and the chair to the outside edge of the background, if I'd used that to do the automatic content aware, it would have grabbed bits from Jeff, filled it all in, and it wouldn't have looked that good. So I'd end up having to do it manually anyway. So that's purely just from knowing what I had to do earlier on. So let's now fill these areas in. I'm going to get my marquee tool, my rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to drag out just this left-hand part here, just to keep just away from his leg there. And we go edit and free transform. I'm going to click and drag. You can see that I'm dragging that out just a little bit. We do have content aware scale in Photoshop, but I tend to find it doesn't give that much of a different result to this. But all I do is just drag it out just a little bit, so somewhere like there will be fine. Let's get rid of that, and I'll then do the same on the other side, coming nice and tight to the chair, get as much of that grey background in as I can just there. Then we go edit, free transform, and we'll drag out just a little bit to give us a little bit more more space when we do use content aware, something like that. All right. Now we've done that, get my marquee tool. Now we've actually got the background where there's a bit more of a gap between the edge of it and Jeff. I'm going to make a selection of it like so. Hold down my shift key, and I'm going to drag out another selection on the right hand side. I can actually position that. If I hold down my space bar, I can click and drag that around as well to reposition it. So let go there. So now you can see we've got selections, active selections on either side of the picture there. And we'll just go to edit, we'll go to fill, and we'll choose content aware and click OK. Fingers crossed, we're going to get a decent result. I don't know if you can hear my computer whirring away there. Any second now. It's like waiting for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, isn't it? The answer's the winner. There we go. All right. So you can see now, pretty good. I'm now getting a tight crop. So that's just one thing that I tend to do when I am, first of all, photographing them. We are in limited space when we're taking these portraits. I'm in somebody's, living room. So there's only so much stuff I can move away. So I'll always make sure that when I'm photographing them, I leave a little bit of a gap between the person and always have a little bit of the background going around the outside that I can then increase the width of it and create a different crop to the image when I'm actually retouching it. So that's that just there. All right. So now one thing we did mention about this particular webinar was we're going to cover through the frequency separation. I'll be honest with you, that is pretty much a webinar on its own. In fact, that could end up being a 4-hour webinar because frequency separation is such a huge topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just a couple of things about how I use my frequency separation. If you want the action that allows you to use it, just go to my website, just put your name and what have you into the little boxes on the right hand side, and then you get like a little creativity pack, if you like, to download, and the action is built within it. When you install it, because there are instructions on how to install it, here you'll have your actions panel. You can see here I've got mine, a frequency separation folder, and it says 16-bit or 8-bit. There is a difference when you're using frequency separation to which particular kind of technique you use to create it, depending on what bit image you're having. So this one you can see here is a 16-bit image. So all I'm going to do now then is just click play. But again, look for the error. This is what some people have had when they've been using the action. So let's just click play. Now, some people have experienced it when they get this little pop-up come up here, which says the command select is not currently available. So we're going to stop that. Now, the reason for that is because when the action was created, it was made when the background layer didn't say layer 0, or the only layer in there didn't say layer 0. It actually said background. So what I'm going to do is go to layer, new, background from layer, and now you can see it's changed to say background with that padlock. All right. So let's go to the action. Close that up just a little bit, close it to there and click play, and you'll see no error, which is kind of cool. All right, so now we've got that. So let's just have a look, just a couple of little things that we're going to do in it. Those of you who don't know, when it comes to frequency separation, it allows us to kind of split the image that we've got so that we can work on the detail of the image or the content or the color completely separately. And that allows us a lot more flexibility and a lot more kind of a quicker way to work and a much more realistic way to work as well. We can do lots and lots of stuff with it. So what am I going to do with it? First of all, let's have a look here. Got a bit of a shine on his nose just there. Again, there are loads of ways we could work on that. Absolutely so many different ways within Photoshop you could work on this shine here to get rid of it. This is just one of the ways we can do it. So here's what I tend to do now, because I've changed the way I work on this kind of stuff. We've got in the frequency separation folder here, we've got 4 layers. The bottom 2 here, we can actually see the thumbnail of Jeff here. These are the color layers of the image. These 2 gray layers here contain all the detail. So I'm going to click on the color layer here. And what I'm going to do is just add a blank layer. Let's just add a blank layer just there. And I'll rename this one to Nose Shine. All right, so now I'm going to get my gradient tool while pressing G on the keyboard, or you could come over to the toolbar. And again, this is something that some people have seen a video that I've done on the frequency separation and had a few problems with it. When we choose the gradient tool, again, we have the options at the top of the screen. Now we're going to use, you've got these options here. There's the different kind of gradients. We've got the linear gradient or the radial gradient, which is the second one along. That's the one that we want to use for definite. However, when it comes to the kind of gradient, we need to use one that says, if you open up the gradient picker just here, the second one along on the top row, second one over from the left, is a foreground to transparent gradient. Some people have had it where they've had the foreground to background. So then as they've used the gradient, the whole image is covered in 2 colors. And those 2 colors are what you'll have visible down here in the toolbar at the bottom. So you must have it set to foreground to transparent. And then all I'm going to do, once I come into my image, I've got my gradient. If I hold down my Alt key on Windows or Option key on Mac, I'll get this color sampler. And where we've got the shine, I'm just going to click down to sample an area of skin just outside of that shine that isn't shiny. click on that. As I do that, it samples it into the foreground just here, and I'll click and drag out a gradient over the top of it there. And I'll do a couple of other different variations of skin tone around the other side here. So Alt key, click to sample that in the foreground, drag out another gradient, and then just on this part here, drag out another gradient. So I'm a bit slapdash with that. You can see that's covering too much of his nose, but all I would tend to do then is come over to the layers panel. We've got the nose shine layer, and I'm going to add a layer mask, but I want to hide what I've done so far. So we need to use a black layer mask. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key, Option key on Mac, click to add a layer mask. And when I do that, it adds a black layer mask automatically. So then I can just get a brush with a white foreground color. Let's make sure that it's nice and soft. And what I'll do is I'll just come in and I'll just brush over that part of the nose just there. So you can have a look. There's before and after. And I might just actually reduce the opacity of it just a little bit. So there's a little bit of shine coming through there. So it's not completely gone. All right, so something like that. Now, what else can we do with this? Well, there's loads we can do. Let's have a look at one thing. We've got some marks on his skin just here. Let's see that there. I reckon that's kind of detail. Let's have a look at this one here. So I'm going to click on a detail layer within the frequency separation folder. And I'm going to go and get my clone stamp tool. Let's just make the size of it go a little bit smaller with the left bracket key. And I'll just hold down the Alt key to sample a clean area of skin. Whoops, there we go. Right, perfect. Not planned, but a great way to show you an error, because some people actually do get this kind of weird stuff happening. The reason for that is when you're using the clone stamp tool within frequency separation, again, in the options bar, choose where it says current layer. If you use current and below, like I just did then, you'll get all kinds of weird, funky stuff happening. So just current layer will be fine. So again, let's come in here, Alt key, sample it, and we can paint over it just there. So it's a great way of getting rid of detail in the picture realistically and really, really quickly. So let's get rid of this hair just here. Let's get rid of that. Sometimes you might find that you can't get rid of what you think is detail, and that might be because it actually contains color as well. So even though you've used the detail layer to get rid of it, and you can still see signs of it, the trick then is to go and create a blank layer within the color section of your frequency separation and just use a gradient to color over the rest of it. And you'll notice then that it will actually disappear. One little mark on his lower lip just here. So click to sample that and we'll get rid of it. So there's so much I could do, I guess, going around this. Lots and lots of things I could do, but we'll just leave it at that for now. But one little thing that you can do within frequency separation, and this is now my go-to way of sharpening eyes because it is just brilliant. And it doesn't give any kind of halo in, no color changes or anything at all. We can sharpen the eyes doing this now. So I'm going to keep active in the layers panel on the detail texture layer over here. And I'm going to get my rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to click out a rectangular marquee that includes the eyes, like so. Then I'm going to hold down my control key and J, or command and J, to jump that selected area onto its own layer. All right, you can see we get this kind of weird gray stuff here, but can you see how detailed that is now? All the detail showing through in there. I need to change the blend mode of this one here to linear light. And all this will be made a lot clearer if you just go onto my YouTube channel and you'll see a video I've done all about frequency separation. But change it to linear light, it will get rid of the gray. But you can see how, if I turn that on and off, can you see how much detail it's actually bringing out there? Obviously, there's loads of detail, all the eyebrows, eyelids, and what have you. We only want it to be on the eyes. So let's now hold down the Alt key or Option key, click on the layer mask icon to add a black layer mask to hide it. We'll get a brush, again with a white foreground color. Not going to be perfectly soft because it's very difficult to paint within an area if it's completely soft, because that soft edge spills over. So I'll just harden it down just a little bit. Make the brush smaller using the left bracket key, and we'll paint in over the eyes just there, and this eye just here. All right, so let's have a look. There's before, after, before, after. I just think that is an amazing way to sharpen the eyes. All right, something like that. Now you could, if you wanted to, kind of reduce the opacity on that if you didn't want it to be quite so sharp. So I might take that one down to around about 75%, something like that. But I just think that now is going to be my go-to method for doing eye sharpening for quite some time. Absolutely love it. All right, so that's that so far then. Let's have a look now. We've gone from, a little bit there. Let's close down this frequency separation folder. And before we get to do the coloring, let's just do a tiny bit of dodging and burning. Quick reminder for those of you who've maybe seen me doing this before. This is something that I do always on every single picture to some degree or another. Blank layer, call it D and B for dodging and burning. And we'll go edit and fill, and we'll choose 50% gray and click OK. And when we're working on skin, which is all we're going to be dodging and burning here, just think of soft skin. So choose soft light as the blend mode. All right. So this is something that you may have seen many, many times, but even though you might have seen it a lot, it doesn't mean to say it's not good. It's like, oh, not that again. It is an incredibly effective way of adding much more depth and contour and character to your pictures. So all I'm going to do with this one then, we'll get the dodge tool again with the options at the top of the screen. Exposure, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I don't take that to any more than 10. I've got this set to 7% at the minute. So it's best when you're doing your dodging and burning, keep it nice and gentle and build the effect up as opposed to going in there too hard and then kind of ruining your picture and thinking, too much, especially when you've saved it and maybe even flattened it. Even worse, you flattened the layers and you haven't got them to go back. So just start off nice and low and just build it up. So let's just do a little bit of the stuff that I'd want to do on this. I'm going to just darken down the shadow area just a little bit on this side of his face. So let's just darken that down there. Just brush over that just a touch, only a little bit. This area here on his cheek just here, I want to darken that a little bit. That's just one of the areas where the light caught it. And I want to take it. My eyes are kind of drawn to that. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. So look, before, after. Let's just brighten up this kind of area where we've actually got the light. Just there's good. And the nose there, the light on the nose, because he's got really smooth skin on this part of his face here. So we haven't got much kind of shape to the nose there. So all I am going to do, again, making sure that this is nice and soft, I'm going to burn down, just add a little bit more contour to the left-hand side of the nose as you're looking at it here. So with the dodge tool, hold down the Alt key, automatically flips me over to the burn tool. And let's just burn that down just a little bit. So we can start to see a little bit more of that side of the nose. There we go, something like that. All right. So just darken down the top of his eyes, just there. And I'll down the side of his face, just on the left. This is one of those things where it's pretty good to have either a nice glass of wine or a single malt, have some good music on, and just take your time doing your dodging and burning. No need to rush it unless you're doing a webinar. All right. So another area that I like to do the dodging and burning is on the eyes. Although they're really starting to stand out, I still come in here now and darken down the outside. So I'm burning now just around the outside of the eye. Quite a few strokes there to darken that down. Like so. Let's go around the eyelids just into here. It's really one of those things that when you're doing your dodging and burning, it's incredibly easy to do too much. Because as you're doing it, you can't sometimes see exactly what you're doing because it can be so subtle. It's not until you go away from the picture or look away and then look back and then you realize exactly what you've done, which is one of the reasons I like to do it on this gray layer, because it does allow me the option to kind of correct things later on. All right, so that's that. And I might just kind of darken down this part of his nose here so that it's not quite so well lit, because the only thing I want there is just the light over the cheek and the eye on the right hand side of the picture as you're looking at it. So we'll just darken that down just a touch, doesn't need to be too much, like that. So dodging and burning, there we go. It's only subtle, but you can see there that it does start to add a little bit more contour to his face. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do now, then I'm going to create a merged layer to the top of the layer stack. In fact, one little thing about that, this point now, before I do a merged layer, this is kind of a little bit of a workflow tip for you. What I tend to do now is I will now save this file. So I've got the background, the frequency separation, and the dodging and burning. I will save that, and I'll call it something like Jeff Layers Part 1. And then what I'll then do is I'll carry on and I'll start to add those merged layers and so on and so on and so on. So I always have areas within the retouching I can go back to before I actually did all this merging layers above them. I like to have various copies of the picture with different layers. And I don't know if that makes sense or not. Rather than me going all the way up and having all the layers, for number one, it helps the computer not to have to work so hard, because I might actually flatten it at this particular stage, but I won't now because I want to show you the full before and after. But generally I would flatten it and then carry on working, but I always keep layers in certain different files as we go through. Right, now one thing I'm going to do is just show you this clarity thing. I don't really use plugins per se, but one I am using at the moment is clarity. So I'm going to go to my filter menu, Topaz Studio. We've got one here called Clarity. I'm going to show you the settings that I use. It's a really fantastic plugin that I use about 0.001% of. I really don't do that much in it at all. And all I tend to want to do with this is when you open up Topaz Clarity, over on the right hand side, there's certain actions. It says basic adjustment, precision contrast, or HSL color tuning. All I tend to do now is in here, I use where it says contrast and I move these sliders. Now I actually saved the settings that I have, and you can see them just here on the right hand side. So where it says contrast, I move the micro contrast to the right. So it says 0.36, the low contrast to 0.18, and the medium to 0.09. So each time it's halved all the way down to the bottom one where I don't change at all. That is all I ever do within this really, what is a fantastic plugin, but like I say, that's all I do. That is all I do within this, and then just click OK. It processes it, it will come back out, and this is actually an effect that I know we have clarity within Lightroom, we have it within Camera Raw, but I just cannot replicate the look using that particular tool. I much prefer this plugin, even though I'm only using a very, very small amount of it. I just find that it's better. Clarity within Photoshop at the moment, I find to be a little bit like clarity on steroids. It's very, very strong, and I just find even at the lowest settings, it's too much. All right, so what's this done for us? No halos, no nothing. It's just a nice amount of contrast you can see just there. That's before, after, before and after. Really subtle, no color shifts, no halos, no nothing. But I don't actually want it on the background because I want Jeff to be really kind of standing out from the background. So again, all I'll do now is hold down the Alt key or Option key, add a black layer mask, get a brush, a white brush, make sure I'm not completely soft on it, and I'll just paint it at 100% to reveal that clarity, that topaz clarity, back onto Jeff. So very quickly coming in and just painting that on. You can do the backslash key there. That shows you where you've been painting if you've missed any areas, which is pretty good. So let's just come in here to this bottom bit. Like so, I've missed anywhere else, just a little bit on there and there. When you're doing yours, take your time, obviously. A little bit on that chair, just there. All right, let's have a look. Yeah, oh, a little bit on there. Cool. All right, so that'll do there. Brilliant. All right, so now then, Camera Raw lighting is the next thing we'll do. So I'm going to create another merge layer. Although I'm really, really happy with the lighting, sometimes I still like to go in and control it a little bit more to help direct where I want the viewer to look. So let's just rename this layer here to Camera Raw Lighting. And then you could, if you're really good, change this now to a convert for smart filters so that you can go in and make changes later on if you want to. But I'm just going to go, I'm going to be radical now and just dive straight into the Camera Raw filter. Double click on the hand tool to spread it out. I only want to do a little bit in here, but we'll grab the radial filter, click and drag it out. Come on the outside, just arc it over just a little bit. Something like, let's go for there. And I'm just going to use the exposure to control that just a touch, just to darken it down a little bit. Can you see that as I do that, though, as I move that exposure, it's actually, not only is it darkening down the outside, giving us a little bit more of a kind of like a vignette, it is actually creeping in and affecting Jeff as well. So what I'll do is this, I'm going to bring it down to around about there, should be good. And then what I can do is I can come up to the top here where it says brush, click to say a brush, and we have the minus, so which means I can come in and actually paint where that vignette was creeping in and over Jeff. I can actually paint it away. So we maintain that vignette, but I'm controlling that it doesn't come over onto Jeff himself. That's pretty good. Let's bring that radial grade, the graduated filter just from the top there, bring that down. See that's creeping in. Yeah, maybe around about there is looking good. Click on the hand tool, liking that, and we'll click OK. So now we're kind of getting where we want to be for the coloring side of things. So this is where we start to look at the lookup tables. Now, lookup tables were, I believe, they were introduced when it got to Photoshop CS6. So those of you who are watching, if you aren't on the Creative Cloud, you can still use lookup tables. Lookup tables were introduced from like the movie industry where they colorize movies. It's always interesting. If you ever get the time, dive onto YouTube and type in one of the most recent movies, maybe, or a famous film, and type in behind the scenes. And a lot of times you'll get to see where the screen will split in two. And on the left-hand side, you'll see what the footage looked like as they were filming it. And on the right-hand side, you'll get to see what it was like when that film was released in the cinemas or on TV. And you can see how, again, like I showed you at the start with my own pictures there, the difference that the color makes completely transforms it. Starts to add the mood, the atmosphere, the look, all that kind of stuff. It really does come from doing the color side of things. But we've got them in Photoshop now, which is just fantastic. I've recently got a Creative Pack 3 for sale, which has got lots of different lookup tables in there, and also ones that I've used to create the looks from certain TV programs and also films. So I use these all the time. Obviously, there are lots of ways we can do coloring within Photoshop, but this is my go-to method. I absolutely love it. So let's have a look how I've, for my signature look on these veterans pictures, what I'm doing with these guys. Oh, incidentally, you can see at the bottom left that with the chair, that there was selected using Quick Mask, and I just kind of used hue and saturation in the final picture that I retouched earlier today, just to change it to a darker color so your eyes weren't drawn to it. All right. Actually, now I've said that, you're probably looking at it, aren't you? All right, so lookup tables, we go to the adjustments in the top right-hand corner. Let's click to add one of these lookup tables. Now, these are ones ordinarily that are already built into Photoshop, so you can start to use these, and then we'll introduce one that I've created myself. So we go to the lookup table adjustment properties here. I've got 3 menus. I tend to really only stick with the top menu. These other ones here I find are a little bit, as the name would suggest, a little bit abstract. But I would suggest that you dive in there and have a play with those just to see if there's some looks that you can create for your own pictures that you might find with some of the presets that are built into all these places as well. But we're going to stick with this load menu at the top here, and we'll go for tension green. And when we get that, straight away you think that's horrible. Let's move on. Let's choose a different way of doing coloring, but stick with it. All right, because there are things we can do. Think about it logically. Now, this is an adjustment layer, and being a layer, it means we have blend modes, opacity, and all that kind of clever stuff available to us, so we can finesse or kind of change what initially comes out the box, which is this horrible green kind of color, although that might work for some pictures. So all I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to take the opacity down to 20. Very subtle, very, very subtle, or something like that. Let's add another one. So we'll click to add the lookup table adjustments just up there. This time we'll go down to, where's one? Edgy Amber. What I'll do is I'll create a look, and then we'll talk about ways that you can save it. A number of different ways you can save it so that you don't have to go through these steps every single time. Let's have a look at that one there. We'll take that one down again to 20. There's another one in here which is pretty cool, actually. Foggy, where are we? Foggy night, just there. Take that one down to 15. I love just experimenting with these. I did have people when I did the Creative Pack ask if I could create thumbnails to show what each of the lookup table adjustments looks like, but there's absolutely no point. The way to do it is to just dive in and experiment, because every picture you use them on, they will look slightly different. All right. So now what I'm going to do is use one of my own. So we'll add a lookup table adjustment layer again. This time, though, when I open up the panel, I'm going to click again where it says Load 3D LUT. And when I click on that, it then brings up my browser. So I can now, if I haven't installed my own LUTs that I've created into Photoshop, maybe I've got them stored on my computer, maybe I've stored them in a folder on Dropbox so that I can access them from anywhere, anytime. This is how we can navigate to them. So we open the folder, click again where it says load, and then we'll just navigate to it. So I'll just go to where I have my Creative Pack Creative Pack 3, we've got the LUT files in here. And the one I'm going to use is the one at the top here. Can you see all these different ones here? 1940s RAF. Click on that one and then click load at the bottom. Now, again, a little tip while I'm remembering it. Sometimes if you've got either you've downloaded some lookup tables or you've exported and made your own, and when you go to navigate to try and find them on the computer, even though you're in the folder where you save them, you might not be able to see them. You think, well, why on earth can't I see it? And that is because LUTs or lookup tables, there are a number of different extensions that are called file extensions. These ones here, can you see in the bottom right hand corner it says .cube? These are all lookup tables here, but there is also .3dl. Some of them have got that file extension to it as well. So look, if I click on .3dl, I can't see any of my lookup adjustments. So if you get panicky and you can't find what it is you want, before you kind of lose the plot, change the file extension that you're telling the computer to look for, and you'll probably find it will reveal them. So we'll go for 1940s RAF, click load. As I do that, bang, there it is. It's now applied it. Again, it's quite strong, although I do love that smoky kind of brown look that we've got on that one. That is a look that I created from that 1940s RAF picture with the guys holding the newspaper that I showed you earlier on. Let's take that down to 20%. No, in fact, no, let's go for 30. Quite like 30. That's before, after, before, and after. And then finally, what I'll do is I'm going to do a bit of a black and white adjustment. So I'm going to press D on my keyboard to go to the default foreground and background colors over here of black and white. And we'll go and add a gradient map adjustment layer. And you know what? There are so many different ways that we can do black and whites out there, aren't there? I mean, sort of Camera Raw and Lightroom now have now got all these presets, which are absolutely fantastic. But again, 9 times out of 10, if I'm doing a black and white, I will just set my foreground and background colors to black and white by pressing D and then use a gradient map. There is so much you can do with it to get this nice black and white here. Hopefully you think that's pretty damn good. If you want to finesse it and maybe play around with it a little bit more, you can actually click on the gradient itself to bring up the gradient editor. And you can start to say, well, I want more whites in there. And as you move one of these markers down the bottom here, you get this little diamond that appears in between the black and the white points. And that's how you can control the transition from the grays and the black, gray and white, the transition between each other. So you can click on that and can change that as well. Can you see how that's now affecting in real time the picture? So there's a great way that we can actually control black and white images just by using a real simple thing built into Photoshop without going out there and paying for another plugin. But we'll leave it at that. Click OK, and we'll probably take the black and white. Don't want it to be completely black and white, just to knock out a bit of color. Maybe take that down to 30% as well. So when I've done that, what we could do now, rather than me thinking I've got to do all that again, if you wanted to, you could, with all of these adjustments in here, just go to the File menu, choose Export, and then you could, one here says Color Lookup Tables. And what that's going to do is it's going to look within your layer stack, look at all the adjustments that you've done, be they color lookup tables themselves, be they gradient maps, be they any other color adjustment, and it'll look at them all and it'll create a single color lookup table file that you can then just use as a one-click effect. So you don't have to go through the whole process of doing each of these steps every single time. And that's great. That's a very, very quick and simple way to work. But the only issue with that is when it creates that single file, you then cannot access all the individual adjustments that went into making that look. So you can, you're kind of losing control. So what I tend to do quite a few times now is this. With the top adjustment highlighted here, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and then click on the very first adjustment that I did, this color lookup adjustment. When I do that, all of them are highlighted. We'll then go to the flyout menu in the top right-hand corner of the Layers panel, and we'll choose New Group from Layers, and I'll call this one, let's call this one Veteran. So all these layers in here, all these adjustments within this little folder here are the signature look that I give to my veterans pictures. And then what I can do, and appreciate this is only for those of you who are on the Creative Cloud, you've got your Creative Cloud libraries. And I've got a few different sort of categories set in here. One of them is called color. And what you could do is click on that group and drag it over into the Creative Cloud libraries. You can see I get this little plus icon. If I now let go of that, excuse me, Give it a few seconds to do its thing. He says, there we go. So now I've got that lookup table built into there. But let me show you something about this. If I just delete it, so now we've gone to the point where Jeff hasn't been colorized. And let's say now then we dive into our libraries. We've got all these different adjustments here that we've saved. And I now want to apply the veteran one to Jeff. I'm going to click on it and drag it out and put it on top of him. And when I do that, we'll just line it all up like so, press enter. And what you'll notice is absolutely nothing happens. And you think, well, why on earth is that? It's the reason for this is, if you can see my layers panel, the veteran layer here that's supposed to colorize my image now, in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little cloud icon. It's kind of like a smart object. If I double click on the thumbnail, it's going to open this up in a separate tab. And again, it doesn't look like there's anything there. But if I put a layer below, just to prove to you that there really is color within that group, there we go. I've just put a gray layer below it there. So there's the gray. And here's the group that contains all the color. And here's all the adjustments. So it's kind of weird that it won't do anything for us on the picture of Jeff. So what we need to do is this. Let's delete it from there. When we've saved the group of all those adjustments that we want to apply to our image within the Creative Cloud library, just hold down the Alt key on your keyboard or the Option key. Then drag it out on top of your picture and let go. And when you do that, you'll notice that it does it. You'll notice here now, rather than having a smart object, we've got the actual folder there containing all the adjustments so that we can now dive in and tweak them to sort of satisfy exactly what we want it to be like. All right, so that's one little tip there for that. Now, racing through just on the coloring side of things here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add now a layer mask to this icon, to this group here, because what I don't like, although I love the coloring, I don't want it to be completely all over his skin as well, because it kind of changes the look of the skin too much. So I add a white layer mask. I get a brush with a black foreground color. And again, don't want it completely soft because it's very hard to paint within an area then. It spills over. So we'll just kind of harden it up just a touch. Well, let's just increase that. And what I'll do is I'll paint it off completely. Now in the layers, in the options bar at the top of the screen, you'll notice that the actual opacity of this brush is 100%. And I'm going to completely remove the coloring off his skin there. Let's hold down the space bar and we'll zoom in and we'll do that on his hands as well. So something like that. So it completely removes it like that. And then if we look at the layer mask, let's just go to the layer mask. You can see now, there it is, black. Black there is concealing the look of the color adjustments within this folder. If I double click on the actual layer mask now, it brings up the properties and we can use the density slider to reduce the black by half or whatever amount you want really, but I tend to reduce it by 50%. So we still have a little bit of that coloring in. So if we turn it before and after, and we can say there's the coloring, that's where it's all over the skin, and that's where we've reduced it by half. So it's before and after, something like that. All right. And the last thing I tend to do, let's just create one more final adjustment. One more final kind of merge layer at the top of the layer stack, and we'll call this one final. And this is probably where I would save the image, which would then send it back into Lightroom so I can just finish off the looks with what I want to do. But we'll do it all from within Camera Raw here now, because it's the same engine anyway. So go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And a couple of things I do here, I go to the Effects tab, and we've got the grain. Now for my own veteran pictures, and again, this is all your choice, I love to use this grain. And I actually use roughly 31 on the grain. I keep the size the same, I keep the roughness the same. But if I zoom in on that, let's just see if I can zoom in. Can you see the look that it's kind of giving over here? This whole grainy kind of look. I absolutely love that. I really love that. Double click on the hand to zoom out. What you can also do here, sometimes if you want to control more of the light, go to add an adjustment brush, go to the exposure, go to the exposure, and I'll probably take that to around about 10, 0.10 or 0.15. And all I do then is just paint over the face just a little bit. Let's just add the mask so we can see where we're painting. Something like that. And we can just control that lighting just a little bit more on his face to really direct the viewer in to where we want to go. So then we'll click OK. And there we go. So let's have a look at the before and after. There's kind of the before, but obviously remember if you're there at the start that we had a different orientation, a different crop on the image. But we've done the crop, done the frequency separation, we've done the dodging and burning, topaz clarity, camera raw lighting, the coloring with the lookup tables. As you can see there, look how different that looks. You can really create some signature looks. And then finally directing the light using the adjustment brush and added in that grain as well. So let's dive back over to Lightroom. And there is the final picture of Jeff Howard, who won the military medal for services in World War II, who was on the beach at Dunkirk. He was in D-Day and many, many other battles. So a real hero. So that is that. So I guess now it's time to take a few questions, easy ones, hopefully, and we'll just kind of see what you've got. So let me just bring up my panel. Actually, before we dive into this one, just quickly, over on I mentioned it already, but on the website, let's just go to here. This is where you can get the creative pack, which is just, if you go to my store, which is glyndewis.com, there's my store. There's the creative pack. And if you use the code BenQ10, you'll get £10 off it as well. All right, and that'll be active up until the end of this week on Sunday night. So that is that. So what questions do we have? All right, let's bring this up. Alexandra, what questions do we have? So what sharpening would you use for areas of the beard? That's from Ian. Now for a beard, areas of a beard, I would tend to use an adjustment brush. So once I've actually got my image into, I do some general kind of sharpening within Lightroom before I actually send the image over and start working on it. But when I'm in Photoshop, I would probably go into Camera Raw and use an adjustment brush to paint over the beard area and then control the sharpening in that particular way. So I'd probably do it that way. All right, let's have a look here. Any others? Are there any limits on how many looks you can store in a library? No, there aren't. Not that I'm aware of, Kevin. But when it comes to limits of LUTs, how many LUTs you can use, I've tended to find that there are limits. And this is one of the reasons that I actually moved camera brands. Now, I'm not here to say Nikon's better than Canon and vice versa, or Sony and all those different brands. This was a personal choice. But what I was finding when I was doing the colorizing of my own images, when I got beyond maybe 3 or 4 lookup table adjustment layers, I would notice to start artifacts appearing in the shadow areas of my image. And I used to be shooting with a Canon. Okay, so this wasn't necessarily the Canon's fault at all, but I just noticed that the file was giving me a bit limiting when it came to how much colorizing I could do before artifacts started to come in. That is the only reason I moved over to the Sony sensor, because now I haven't really noticed a limit. And sometimes I know some of the war pictures that I've been doing and a recent family shoot, I think I had about 8 different color lookup adjustments in there, and I still didn't notice any artifacts coming in. So as for how many LUTs you can store in the library, no, I think it's only going to be limited by how much space and storage you've got there, I guess. Although a look may be saved, I assume that the look will be different according to the base image, not uniform. Absolutely, Ian. And this again just reinforces the reason why I said that when I released that Creativity Pack 3, I didn't have thumbnails to say, if you use this particular lookup table that I've made, it will give you this look. If you create this one, it will create this look, and so on and so on and so on. It really is a case of just experimenting and finding out what works best. What I tend to find is that you can have more control over how those lookup table adjustments affect the image and get more of a have more of an understanding of what they'll do is if you kind of maybe reduce the vibrance of the colors within your picture before you apply those lookup tables. You tend to find that certainly in video editing, this could be something we take from video editing. When they're filming, they have those flat profiles, don't they, when they're doing the filming, film footage, and they put that into Premiere Pro, and it's a very flat, low contrast kind of bit of footage that they then go and apply their color to, and then the lookups and what have you. So that might be something that I could look at doing with my own images to see if it makes a big difference, just reducing the contrast, reducing the vibrance. I'm using C6. Could I use an action to save the veteran look? Andrew, absolutely you could. 100% you could use an action to do that. Hi, Glyn. For the clarity, instead of topaz and using high pass, reducing the opacity, would that still give the same, or would it be too harsh? Darren, I've never really liked using the high pass for doing sharpening because I did tend to find that it did give me a little bit of halos. And again, it was very, very strong. There's just something about topaz, and I don't get any money from topaz. I don't kind of you'll notice on my website, I'm not like I don't think I'm still, I used to be an ambassador. I'm actually not sure if I still am now, but if I am, I have no idea what my code is. But I just love the clarity because high pass is a single effect. Clarity in Lightroom and Photoshop at the moment is a single slider effect, whereas the one in clarity, you can dive down into the details. There's like that micro contrast, low contrast, so you can really have much more control over how you apply it. If you don't have Creative Cloud, is there a way to save LUTs so that they can still be edited? Andrew, I hope. Well, do you know what? Actually, what you could do, here's what you could do. Obviously, you couldn't drag them like I did into the Creative Cloud folder. However, what you could do is this. When you've got your image, all kind of, when you're working on your image and you've got your adjustments in there, what you could, and this is just thinking off the top of my head, you could then duplicate it. In fact, let me, I'll take it you can still see my screen. If you can't, somebody say it in the actual comments there. What you could do is this, and this is, like I say, it's just thinking off the top of my head now. Here we've got our image of Jeff. What you could possibly do is this, so that you don't ruin your own image and you want to keep everything safe. I would go to something like image and duplicate, and I would just call this one veteran. Okay. And then I would simply delete all the layers in there. Let's get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. So now I've got this layer here that contains all those. In fact, I'd even get rid of the layer mask. So there's the folder that contains all the adjustments that I want for my veteran. I would then just go to something like File, Save As, and I would call this veterans.psd, so Photoshop file, and I'd probably create a folder within my Dropbox with all these files in it. And then all I would have to do is go File, Open, and drag it over on top, or File, Place, and put this file on top of my image, and I'll be able to colorize it. Does that make sense? Just on top of my head, I might do a little video on that, but I think that could be a good workaround for those of you who choose not to do the Creative Cloud, because not everybody wants to. What else we've got? Can you achieve a matte effect look with LUTs? Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah, if it's color, you can create it with LUTs, but don't limit yourself to only using the lookup tables. Use the lookup table adjustment layers with other color adjustments within Photoshop. So like selective color, color range, hue and saturation, color balance, you name it. Combine them all together and just experiment. And I always tell people to have that attitude of what would happen if, because you never know what you're going to create. And what if you just keep experimenting, you'll stumble across something and go, I like that, and then you can save it. All right, that's how these looks are actually discovered, isn't it? Is there any way to batch process a LUT? I guess there is, but I'm not somebody who batch processes. It's not something that I like to do. There are people out there who really love it and they're really good at that. Even when I've been writing my books and you have to kind of all the screen grabs that you do to go into the book, where you have to convert them to a different color space that the publishers want, save them as TIFFs and then save another layer with all the annotations on. I do all of them manually. And yeah, there's probably some of you going, what? But I like to have the control of that, because when I wrote my first book, I tried to batch it and it went completely crazy. I spent more time trying to sort that out than I did actually writing the book. So I like to do that manual. But G. Upton Fletcher, if you do find a way of batch process and look, let us know. But what modifier did you use on the light for the image on which you worked? Raymond, that one there it's a medium octa. It's by Westcott. They're the light modifiers that I use, and it's called the Westcott Rapid Box Switch Medium Octa. And the Rapid Box means that literally just open it very quickly like an umbrella. It takes literally a second to open the whole thing up. And the switch side of it means that the actual part of the modifier that attaches onto your light, you can change. So I could take the adapter off, put a different one on, and actually use the same modifier on a speed light or any other brand of light. So I only need to buy one modifier. I can then use it on multiple types and brands of lights as well. So it's a cost-effective way to work. Anything else? I think that's it. I think we can end the webinar now. That's the message at 5 to 6. Cool. There you go, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. BenQ 10 is the code for that creativity pack. But massive thanks from me to the folks at BenQ for the support that they give me with these monitors. And again, like I said, I've built a reputation. I would like to think on trust. I love using these monitors because what you see is what you get. They have yeah, the colors are great. I've got no dead pixels. I've got a lens hood, sorry, a screen hood, and the prices, well, there you go. Very, very good when you compare what else is out there. I'm very, very happy. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to BenQ and Color Confidence.